Welcome back to my channel, True Crime with Jess Rose. I'm here every Tuesday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Tuesdays are my request evening. Thursdays are stories I like to bring to you. If you can't make the live, which is fine, I understand, then Tuesday's live goes up on my pre-recorded videos on a Saturday. Thursday's live goes up on my pre-recorded on a Sunday. If you know what... all I mean by pre-recorded, it just goes into my videos. That's all I mean. Or if you're on the TikTok, I'm over there as well. I don't actually know what I'm under on TikTok, to be honest. Maybe I should know that. But I'm over there anyway. I'm over there. Just put in Jess Rose. I'm over there. But yeah, so that'd be great. Or if you could subscribe, I'd really appreciate that too. I genuinely would. But so we're going to begin. We're going to begin tonight's story. We'll warn you, it's horrific, as I've said in the title. So, oh God, it really is. So I'm going to begin now. Okay, right. So we have a young girl called Cheri Lindsay. She was born on the 6th of June, 1971 in Binghamton, New York. It's an American story. Her dad is Sergeant Dave Lindsay, Mum Jean Lindsay. She had an older sister and two more siblings. She's one of four kids. I know one of her sisters is called Shelley. Not too sure of the other siblings' names, but I know she's one of four children. Okay, from what I could see in family pictures, I know she's got a younger sibling, so I don't know if she's the third down. Okay, so very cute little baby with big blue eyes. That's all I've seen about her everywhere I've looked, these big blue eyes, and she is cute little girl. As she got to school age, she started to show an interest in sports and music, and she was a straight A student going through school. She was a very, very clever girl. Now, when she got to middle school, which is sort of, it's when it's at, we start secondary school at 11. I believe they don't start their high school till 14 in America, 14, 15. So middle school is the equivalent of our year 7. So when we start secondary school, so when she was starting middle school, sorry, it said she's a funny, popular girl. Remember I said she was into sports and music. She ended up playing softball very, very well. It said she played clarinet for the school orchestra, I believe. And it said she wanted to be either a nurse or a vet when she grows up. So all very laid out for her. Really, everything I've read about this girl, it said she was meant to go far. She really was. Now we get to when Cheri's age 12. Okay. And at this point, as I said, she's in middle school. She's going to East Middle School. It's in Broome County, and that's where Binghamton is located, in Broome County in New York. And so she went to East Middle School there. Says she did very well in class. Again, like I say, flying with regards to her academic God, I'm doing well in academics, aren't I? She's doing well in school. Very, very well. Okay, we'll leave it at that because I've just showed I wasn't very academic. And after school, she'd recently started a paper round. Okay. And the paper round she was doing it for is the Press Republican newspaper. That was the newspaper she'd deliver. And she was her paper round only consisted of about 35, 36 houses. So quite a small paper round, okay? And it was near her own home. It was in her own area where she did her paper round. I mean, you might say 12's quite young, and I suppose it is now, but I had my first paper round, I think, at 10 or 11. So back then, it's 1984, having a paper round quite young is just something the kids would do, okay? Now, she was always on time, it was said. One of her customers, who she delivered to, would say You could predict the exact second, not even the minute, the exact second your paper would show up. So she's a really focused girl by the sounds of it. Now she was also responsible for collecting money for the papers. Now I had to do that at one time myself, and it's just where you collect the weekly subscription for the papers. I had to do it. We used to do it once a month, okay? And obviously Cheri done it once a week, okay? Now, this is something she was expected to do every Monday, all right? Now, Jean, obviously Cheri's mom, she would collect the money with Cheri. She'd go around, you see, because obviously in America, they can throw their newspapers, or I suppose even if they put it through the letterbox like we do here, or used to. I don't even know if there's paper kids here anymore, but you used to put it through the letterbox. But for the most part, you wouldn't need to speak to the people in the house. Just put it through the letterbox, much like your post comes through. And that was quite safe. But because on a Monday she'd be actually knocking on the doors and to collect the money, and obviously dealing face to face with the people who had this newspaper subscription, her mum, she'd only just started. She was, she wanted to make sure she was okay. She wanted to check the route Cheri was going on. So on a Monday, her mum would go with her. Okay, now we get to Monday, March 26, 1984. All right. Now, it's 3:30 p.m. Obviously, Cheri's back from school. Now, Monday, as I've said, is the day that she collects the money. She collects the subscription for the newspaper she works for. She delivers for, sorry. All right. Now, Jean, who for the past month or so, I think she'd been doing this paper round, I had gone with her. But on this particular day, Jean was in the middle of cooking dinner and stuff, and Cheri was like, look, I'll be fine. I'll be back within the hour. It's fine. I'll go and collect it. They lived in a very, very safe place, Binghamton, back in the 80s. I believe it's still very close-knit even now. It was a safe place to live. It was a safe place to bring your kids up, okay? So her mum was like, right, okay, fine, go on then. So she agreed she could go on her own. And Cheri was due to come back about 4:30 at the latest. That was around the time that Jean was expecting her to be back. Certainly before dinner. But, she was expecting her around that time, okay? But 4:30 comes and goes. And there's still no sign of Cheri. Now, Jean was, she was a little bit uncomfortable with that. I'm presuming, she is only 12. It's her first time doing this particular job that she's got. It's the first time she's, when I say that, I mean it's the first time she's collecting the money on her own. So Jean's a little bit, tetchy. But then another hour goes by and Cheri's still not home. And now Jean's getting really concerned to the point where she's getting quite frantic. So she calls Dave. Now, Dave, obviously, Cheri's dad, who is a sergeant at the local police station. She calls him and she's like, she hasn't come back. I don't know what's going on. There's no reason for her not to have come back yet. This just isn't like, obviously there's no mobiles then, but it's just not like their daughter. As I said, even the customers of the newspaper she delivered would say she was so on time. She was so punctual. The fact that she, excuse me, the fact that she hadn't come home was a real concern, okay? So Dave sends out a message to all the officers to keep an eye out for her on their patrols, okay? And Jean, for her part, she was calling all Cheri's friends, talking to their parents, but no one's seen her. No one's seen Cheri. And Dave himself, okay, he's a police officer. He's a sergeant, he's worried, not only, obviously it's his daughter, but he hears horror stories. So he's really, really concerned, as well as Jane. But I mean, he's thinking different things. Okay. So throughout the evening and the night, police were stopping cars in the area. You know, they really got things moving very, very quickly looking for this girl. And like I say, Dave being in the force, he knew all of these were bad signs. The fact that she still wasn't home. Okay. Now, someone come forward and said the last sighting of Cheri was about 5 p.m. So that's still it's a bit later than she was even thought she'd be home. But that wouldn't have been a big deal even if she'd have come back just after 5. Okay. But that was the last known sighting of her. All right. Now, what the police did, they searched the homes of all the paper round customers that she would have had to have gone round to while collecting the money for the subscriptions, but there was still no sign of her, none whatsoever. Now, what they did as a police force, they reached out to other police stations. Now, probably apparently, there was a thing at that time called the Loop, like a Loop service, and it was a precursor for the Amber Alert. So it's a loop alert, I suppose you could call it. And basically what it would be, they'd contact all surrounding police stations to also keep an eye out for Cheri. A description was put out there. I think she was only about 70 pounds. She was a tiny girl. Okay, so they're all on the lookout for her, what she was wearing, everything else. I think she had some old trainers on, blue jeans, you know, so all of that was put out. And it quickly become a really, really huge search for this little girl. There was dogs out there, helicopters, police on foot, police obviously in patrol cars. This was a big search for this little girl. And I think because of the town being such a low crime place, you know, this was really unusual. So Jean speaks to Dave, obviously, which is Cheri's mum and her dad, and she says she doesn't know for certain, okay, but there's a man that lives about 7 blocks from where they live. It's on Cheri's paper route, and not only when she saw him when they were collecting the money, but Cheri herself had said, you know, she finds him a little bit weird. She finds him a little bit creepy. Now, this man was actually called James Wales. Okay, he's 35 years old. And James also works for the newspaper, okay, the Press Republican. He also works for them. Now, James did used to work in corporate and everything else. He lost his job. He'd got lost in alcohol and depression, everything else. He'd lost his job a couple of years beforehand. So this is what he was doing. He was doing a paper round. And he had done for the past couple of years, but he was leaving. He was going on to get another job. So basically, he was teaching Cheri his round, because it would be his round she was taking over. And yeah, Cheri had been saying she thought he was a little bit creepy. And like I say, Jean had saw him herself when they were collecting the money, because he also received he not only delivered the newspaper, he received that newspaper. And when collecting the money, Jean had a bad feeling about him as well. So she said it wasn't anything she could put a finger on specifically, but she just had a really bad feeling. And she said to Dave, she said, if you're going to find her, she'll be at Wales's house. And obviously his name is James Wales. Okay. Now, like I say, James 35 is quite a quiet man. He's been with the Press Republican for 2 years, as I've said. Now we get to Tuesday, March the 27th, 1984. So it's now the next day. 30 hours have gone by. All right. So it's the following evening. All right. So the police go to question James Wales. Okay. Knock on the door. And the reason they're a little bit more concerned by James, now don't forget with Jean, it was just a feeling that she had. But when they looked him up, although they said that he wouldn't have been on their radar initially, because all he had was a couple of misdemeanors, a DUI, quite petty reasons for these misdemeanors. Okay, well, they are misdemeanors. They found out that a few years beforehand, at where he used to live before he moved to Binghamton, social services had been investigating him for the sexual assault of a little boy. Okay, so of course, red flag alarms start to go off with these police officers when they find this out. Although no charges were ever brought, he also moved. Social services didn't chase him. I don't know who the child was, but the police, it gives them a bit more of a reason to see him as a suspect now. So they go round to his house, like I say, to question him. And the police noticed that while they were talking to him, he seemed really nervous. He seemed really uncomfortable while they were standing there. Now, don't forget, they'd questioned everyone on this route, but he just stood out as being, not only did he have this history, but he was really kind of, just very uncomfortable with the questioning. And the policeman who was doing it was like, right, okay, we're going to bring him down to the station. He really gave the impression that something going on here. So he actually says that he'd never seen Cheri the day before. That's what he had been saying. Now, like I say, Cheri, he'd been training Cheri to do his round. So the fact that it was like, no, I haven't seen that, no, and his reaction to it, it was all a bit questionable. Now, James himself, he was married with 2 kids, plus he had an 11-year-old stepchild, okay? So when he got taken to the police station, his wife allowed the police to search the house while James was at the station, all right? So as they're looking around the house, first they find Cheri's paper bag, all right? It's the first thing they find as they're looking around. It's not a good sign. So when they find that, they're like, right, okay, we've got a problem now. So they bring more officers in to really search this entire house. And it takes a little while, but when they go down to the basement, there's a basement and then there's a fruit cellar. Okay, so you've sort of got some stairs to the basement and then it turns and then you've got a fruit cellar. And in the corner of the fruit cellar, they found little Cheri deceased. She was 12 years old. She was just doing a paper round. She was just collecting the money. And there she is, the bottom of someone's basement, just discarded there under a blue blanket. Okay. Now, although James had been denying seeing Cheri, as we know, during this questioning, of course, when they brought James in for the questioning, they hadn't found Cheri at that point. So he's saying, I haven't seen her, and he's all very in denial, still really shifty, still really uncomfortable with the questioning. But they're kind of trying to find out as much as they can with him. But while they've got him there, they hear news that Cheri has been found in his cellar. Okay? So when they tell him, listen, we know you're lying because that little girl's just been found in your basement. Apparently he goes quiet for a little bit. He goes a little bit quiet. And then he begins to tell the investigators exactly what happened. Look, doesn't even try and hide anything. He just tells them exactly what happened. Okay. Now, what had happened was, now you might think, how did she end up in there? Now, remember I said he was training her. Now, it was found out that James didn't used to get the newspaper delivered for the newspaper he worked for, who he delivered for. He never used to get that newspaper. But as soon as Cheri was taken on to take over his reign, he began receiving, he subscribed to that newspaper then, knowing that she would have to knock on for the money. Okay. So that night, to believe that maybe she was knocking on for the money for the newspaper. And it said that James's stepson originally answered the door. He's 11 years old. He went to her middle school. She recognised him. Don't forget, she's been dealing with James. And although she found him a little bit creepy, the fact that his stepson was there, who she knew from middle school, when she was invited into the house, I suppose she wouldn't have been scared. She wouldn't have been uncomfortable. I imagine if it was just James on his own, I would say, given what I've read about this girl and how responsible she is and how clever she was, not clever, because that, I mean, she just seemed quite, she didn't seem like she would go in, given the fact she'd been telling people how creepy she found him. But I suppose the fact that his stepson was there, she would have felt safe. So she goes in. But when she walks in, the stepson goes back upstairs and leaves her with James. Okay. So he then says, she began yelling, okay, and screaming. So I put my hand over her mouth, okay, and then I tried choking her, all right. He says, I then struck her over the head a few times with a table leg, the wooden table leg. Why? He says, I then tied her hands behind her back with rope. Okay. I put a t-shirt in her mouth and then choked her with a rope until she stopped struggling. I then pulled off her blue jeans and her underwear, and I had intercourse with her. Just very matter-of-factly. No feeling in his tone. All just very matter-of-fact. But, gets worse. Then he says after that, he hung her from the sewer pipe with a clothesline. And then I went upstairs. He says, when I come back to the basement, I then untied her, and she was dead then. Okay. He took the money out of her money bag. He took the notes and put them under his mattress. And he took the coins and put them in a white dresser that was in the basement. And he says, I thought Cheri was dead before I hung her from this sewer pipe. So he'd actually thought he'd killed her before he hung her from the sewer pipe. But I did it to make sure. He wanted her dead. It wasn't that this was a sexual assault gone wrong and he didn't know what to do. He wanted her. He wanted to make sure she was dead. Oh, my stomach dropped when I heard that. It was like I say, this wasn't a quick thing where he'd sexually assaulted her and accidentally killed her. Which, neither here nor there, I'm just saying, he deliberately then hung her to make sure she was dead. She's 12 years old. And like I say, all of this was said very matter-of-factly, no remorse whatsoever. When they're looking around, now Cheri was found, like I say, so you've got the basement and then you've got the fruit cellar, and she was in a corner. Now in the basement itself, there was blood found on the floor, on the walls, on the sewer pipe. There was a hair was found too. It was just found in that spot in the basement. And there was no other sign of Cheri anywhere else in the house, so it's all in the basement. Okay. Now, like I say, it was because he was training Cheri. It was believed that, obviously, with him subscribing to the newspaper, that he never had that newspaper delivered in the whole time he'd been working for them. When he subscribed, it was because while he was training her on his route, he just began to become so obsessed with her, and it had reached that climax when she knocked on the door that evening and she walked into the house. His stepson was upstairs. He's 11 years old and he was upstairs. 6th of April, 1984. Okay. Grand jury indicts James Wales on 3 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of first-degree sexual assault, and 1 count of first-degree assault. Okay. There's a media firestorm out there. Poor Cheri's family are losing their mind. Her parents, of course, her dad, being in that field, that must have been awful for him, because he kind of knew at the beginning that this was bad, but he wouldn't have put that across to the family, of obviously a mum, because he would want to keep hope out. But him of all people would have known that this might not end up very, very well. And it was just utter, the whole time were heartbroken. The whole time were in utter shock. They couldn't believe this had happened in their little town. Okay. Now, James pleads not guilty. The audacity, even with the confession, he pleads not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect, which was like a precursor for insanity plea. Audacity. Now, it was said that it was around this time that it had switched. Now, I didn't realise that back then it was up to the prosecution to prove that the defendant was sane enough to stand trial. So you'd have a defendant and their lawyer coming forward and saying, no, insane, can't do it, can't be found guilty. And it would be up to the prosecution to be like, no, they are sane, and to have to prove that, which is, I'm shocked that was the way it was. But around that time, literally by a couple of months, apparently, it changed to the defense having to prove that their client is insane. So I don't know whether he didn't know that, maybe, but that was the route he was going. And obviously it's a lot harder to prove sanity than to, it would have been a lot harder to prove sanity. That's right. It would have been harder to prove he was sane than them trying to prove he's insane. I don't know. I just think he would have known it would have been hard for them to prove his sanity. Okay. So we get to the 18th of October, 1984, and the trial goes ahead for James Wales, okay? Now, the prosecution themselves, it should have been a slam dunk, okay? They've got the confession. They bring the stepson in, all right? And what the stepson actually says, which is awful, he heard screams that night. And it says that he confided in a friend from school that he thought that the screams were coming from Cheri and that his stepdad had something to do with it. He actually confided in a friend at school. It must have been the next day, because don't forget, James was picked up that night and Cheri was found the following night, wasn't she, in the family home. That child was in that home. Not just the stepson, James's own children that he had with his wife. He had 2 kids with her, also in that house. And they all would have slept in the house that night while that little girl was broken in the basement. Oh, God. Oh, it's just awful. The defence tried to say, of course, going down the insanity plea and going along the route that it was a burst of anger that he couldn't help, he couldn't control. It was a mental illness that meant that when he'd lose his temper, there was nothing he'd be able to do with it, and it just came over him. And he tried to say that he believed it was his mother that he was killing, that he was strangling. Was it his mother he was sexually assaulting? Like, how does that work? And obviously the prosecution are like, don't be ridiculous. There's no way he could have confused his, Cheri with his mother. Let's not be stupid now. Now the autopsy, obviously the medical officer come forward to also on the stand. And what they said was, because there was no sign of Cheri anywhere else in the house, they believed that when she would have been stood in the living room, he would have grabbed her and he would have threw her down to the basement, because her hair and her blood were only found down there. There was no other sign of Cheri anywhere else in the house. So he would have thrown her down to the basement. It was said that she was alive. She would have been alive when she was raped. And it also could have taken her 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes, to die while she was hanging from that sewer pipe. 30 minutes. So him saying, I believe she was dead before I did it, but I hung her to make sure. She wasn't dead. She died hung from that sewer pipe. Up to 30 minutes it took. I mean, oh my God. So he'd thrown her down the stairs. He tried strangling her. He hit her with the chair leg. He then put a rope around her neck. He then raped her. And she was still alive through all of that. And then he hung her. Oh, God, absolute beast. On the 30th of October, 1984, the trial ends, okay? Verdict is guilty, of course. What else would it be? Okay, he was found guilty of second-degree murder, thank God. I think it only took the jury three and a half hours, a bit less, to come to that verdict. And on the 14th of November 1984, the sentence was passed down. Now, don't forget, he was found guilty of second-degree murder. So the max that could be given to him was 33 1/3 years to life. That was the sentence that was handed down. But the judge did say he puts out a plea to future parole officers to keep James behind prison walls forever. Basically, he never wanted that man ever out again. Now, when I mentioned that the defence had come forward saying, oh, he has these sudden bursts of anger and, it's a mental condition, there's nothing he could have done. Do you want to know how ridiculous the defence had been? They brought forward 2 ex-wives of his. The defence did this, and they brought forward 2 ex-wives who said that, yes, he'd been violent to them and he'd sexually assaulted both of them. I don't know how the defence thought, yes, this is going to get him off. This is going to prove that this guy just can't help it. The prosecution was like, I bet they must have thought, well, here we go. This just adds to his confession and everything else, doesn't it? Because they were like, well, look, you're proving our case. This man is a nightmare. He's violent. He's a sexual predator. What are you? They've got to have been thinking, why are you bringing these women forward? So that's what had happened during the trial. I just remembered that. I was like, oh my God. Now, remember, he got 33 years and a third. So his first parole hearing was in 2017. Okay. At this point, he's age 68. Okay. His parole was denied, even though he tried to say, you know, I understand the pain I brought to her family and my family and everything else. But his parole was denied. Okay. But unfortunately, from then on, there will be a parole hearing every 2 years from then on. So he's had 6 parole hearings up to date. All right. His first was in 2017, as I've said. He had another one 2019, 2021. He had 2 in 2023. Okay. So that's 5, sorry. Now, up until 2023, he was 74 years of age then. And the reason he had 2 in that year, the first one he'd been denied, and the second one was brought forward for health reasons, non-terminal, but for health reasons. And the governor got involved, you know, the whole community, of course, Dave and Jean, who have been first and foremost throughout all these years to make sure this man never gets out of prison. And with everything going against him, yes, it was turned down again, so he was denied again. Now, his 6th parole hearing is this year. I've checked. The last thing I can see is in January. I haven't got a decision for this year's. I'm going to say I don't think he's going to get out. Obviously, if he does, I'll do an update. I'll keep an eye on it. But as it stands at the moment, I haven't been able to see whether this year's has been denied or he has been given parole. I wouldn't have thought so. He is 76 years of age, and to be honest, I think he's going to die in prison. But, and given the fact that it was such a stain on that small town in New York, it's never been, the case has never, ever been forgotten. So I'd really like to think he'll never get out, but I will keep an update on that. Now, James Wales' house, obviously where he murdered Cheri, became known as the Cheri Lindsay ghost house. Okay. Obviously decades start to go by, kids walk past, it becomes this that's the name they call it. Now, it did have a couple of people buy the house over sort of 30 years, a 30-year period, but they all ended up leaving. They all ended up saying, you know, there'd been some very ghostly things going on within the house. So one says a kid's toy blocks were kicked over. She felt someone brushed by her. Another tenant did. You know, another owner did. Owner of the house did. Sorry. You know, no one was comfortable staying. You know, after buying that house, it had foreclosed after James was found guilty. Obviously, his wife and kids were out of there. I can't even imagine how she must have felt. How the stepson you know, after hearing the screams, can't imagine how he is these, you know, even now. So yeah, then the house stayed empty for like another decade. But we got to the 30th of July 2020, and the house was demolished. All right. And Jean, obviously Cheri's mom, she swung a sledgehammer at the front door. She like began the demolition. Okay. And when the door was open, before they actually tore it completely down, see, Jean had been holding on all those years to, would it have been 36 years? She'd been holding on to Cheri's paper bag, the bag that you carry with all your newspapers in. And she actually brought it with her to that demolition. And when the front door was opened after she played it in with a sledgehammer, she threw the bag in with it. And she just basically said it was finally time to let it go with the house. And the house was demolished. Just, oh, awful. The family, I mean, the dad worked tirelessly through all these years. The Cheri Lindsay Memorial Park a park was renamed the Cheri Lindsay Memorial Park. There's so much stuff there. There's like a swimming pool, skate park. There's, you know, it's a dog park. There's so much on this ground. There's a big memorial to picture of Cheri on the wall as you walk in. There's also the Cheri Lindsay Memorial Fund, that's for Binghamton. It's like a scholarship fund for the local middle school and secondary school. Sorry, the secondary school. I don't know why I've said so. It's a high school in America, isn't it? For students to go on to get a scholarship to college. Now, unfortunately, in February of 2023, David Lindsay passed away. He did pass away at the age of 81. But Cheri Lindsay's mom, Jane, is still with us. And the family have said, you know, they're heartbroken over losing their dad. And the daughter was called, so it'd be Cheri's sister. I believe it was her older sister called Shelley. She broke down just basically saying, you know, we promised him we would keep going to make sure that man dies in prison. He never gets out. And that's what the family obviously are going to continue to do. And I think it's awful that they have to go through this every 2 years. Every 2 years is awful. Can't believe the man hasn't died yet. You know, I just think it's really, really, really sad that they're having to go through that and having to relive it every 2 years. It must be, you know, it must be the same feeling that they had 40 years ago. You know, it's just it's just very, very, very sad. But yeah, that was the horrific Cheri Lindsay story. Just utterly heartbreaking. Really, really sad. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. Like I say, I am live on a Tuesday and Thursday. But my stories do go up on a Saturday and Sunday. If you don't want to come through to the live, that's fine. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I'd really appreciate that. But I also just really appreciate you watching. So thank you so much again. I really do appreciate it. Take care. Thank you.